Welcome back to the 16th edition of the ABLF Talks, broadcasting live across Asia and the world. And we are excited to be welcoming our next two guests to the stage to discuss fast-tracking financial inclusion for the digital economy. Ahmed Alnaqbi has been at the helm of Emirates Development Bank as its Chief Executive Officer since May 2021. As CEO, Ahmed spearheads EDB's strategy aimed at transforming the bank as a key enabler and contributor to support the UAE's economic diversification plan, industrial growth, and adoption of advanced technologies. With his futuristic vision, Ahmed is the transformative force behind EDB's innovative and digitization strategy, overseeing a program to increase efficiencies and foster overall economic growth. Welcome, Mr. Ahmed Alnaqbi.
Thank you, Sally. Pleasure to be here.
We also have with us Sonia Gokhale, founding partner of VentureSouq. Previously, she was at the Global Special Situations Group of Abu Dhabi Investment Council, a large sovereign wealth fund based in the UAE, focusing on venture capital and tech deals. Prior to this, Sonia was an actuarial consultant at Mercer Human Resource Consulting in its Dubai and Toronto offices. Welcome, Ms. Sonia Gokhale.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you both. Now, Ahmed, if I could start off with you to understand what, in fact, have been the biggest challenges, the biggest impacts of COVID-19 on the banking industry here in the region.
So you could summarize it in a few different ways, but for the banking industry, especially when you talk about the physical footprint of what the banks are here locally in the region, the biggest effect was that shift that had to happen to go overnight from having the ability to meet face-to-face in the physical presence with your clients and your customers to shifting completely towards digital models. And it really forced the whole industry to accelerate their adoption of various technologies and to have to adopt their business models and their origination models and their customer service models to be in line with the digitization that was already happening in other industries. I would say that's definitely the biggest impact that we all saw across the industry.
And this is definitely something that we have seen across other industries too. Talk to us about how all of that is translated into challenges, particularly as well for leaders in the financial sector over the last 2 years.
So banking in many ways is a people's business. I mean, we deal with whether it's organizations or companies, SMEs, large corporates, or the retail side of things, you're always dealing with individuals. And it's not necessarily a product or that you're selling. It's essentially a service that you're providing. It's a service industry that you're working with these people on. So from a leadership perspective, it's how do you reorganize your organization in order to be digitally focused and still have that reach and have that ability to service your clients and your customers while not being able to be physically present with them. I mean, look at us now. We're having this whole conference over a Zoom call. 2-3 years ago, I would have been not shocked, but I would have been relatively surprised to see a conference as the size of ABLF conducted completely over Zoom. Banks in many ways had to adopt this approach of going digital, and their business models themselves had to shift and change a lot. So the client calls had to change, the way that you have your meetings internally had to change, the technologies had to change, the way that you provide your services and your expectations of your clients had to change. It also went into rules and regulations. So things that previously were not necessarily acceptable within banks when you talk about the different compliance standards, what signatures, physical face-to-face interactions for KYC, all of these things had to adopt and had to change, had to pivot to a certain extent in order to accommodate the world that we live in today, where a lot of it is distance-based.
And so, Sonia, in the same way, I'm going to ask you as well in terms of when we're looking at investments in tech companies, especially for the startup ecosystem in the region, what has been the biggest impact of COVID there?
We've actually seen an acceleration of technology happened. So, in March 2020, when everything was happening, everything was uncertain. We weren't sure where everything was going. And then for the reasons Mr. Ahmed just said, how everything needed to go from, completely kind of manual processes to digital processes, we've seen that tech is what has brought it to the forefront and it has helped us through this pandemic. And we actually launched our fintech, one of the region's first fintech fund in September 2020. So kind of, raising, and we fundraised and, got LPs during the pandemic, because we saw that it wasn't just going like this, it really went like hockey stick growth in terms of the fintech that we're seeing, the quality of fintechs that we're seeing, the challenges that the problems that they're solving in the region. And it was quite phenomenal. So I really do believe that tech is what helped us through this pandemic. So so as soon as the pandemic, you can't go to the grocery store. So, you're calling and, all of a sudden you got an app that's bringing groceries to you. And same thing in the banking and the financial sectors, that all of a sudden, wet ink signatures are not possible. So now everything is digital and done online. And we wouldn't have been able to do that without the technology that's brought in. And us as fintech investors have really seen that, firsthand how it grew.
Absolutely. I mean, all of us have really had to rely so much more on technology during the pandemic just to keep things going. And absolutely, we're seeing this reflected in the startup ecosystem, which is exciting there, because we're seeing these new innovations coming through. So Ahmed, to you, there's very much been a rise of mobile wallets and cashless transactions as being the safest and often fastest payment modes in this new normal. So talk to us about how you feel the government should support digital financial inclusion.
So definitely governments in the region, but especially the UAE, the United Arab Emirates, is always on the forefront when it comes to regulations, when it comes to ensuring that we have the best and the latest technology that is meaningful towards our society, and especially when it deals with economic growth and impact. And so if we're going to use the example of mobile wallets or payment systems, I could tell you that there's multiple initiatives that have been set up between the different zones of ADGM and DIFC, which are there as sandboxes to allow for these kinds of companies to be nurtured and to grow and then to actually operate onshore. The central bank themselves have multiple regulations and different different policies that they've passed over the past 2 years to accelerate the adoption of different digital services and products. This actually goes back, by the way, to 2006, where the central bank had their first policy on electronic signatures and electronic verification, but it didn't really become practical and implemented in practice till the Corona period or the post-COVID shutdowns and lockdowns that ended up occurring. But definitely the UAE and the government plays a very proactive and active role in nurturing and enabling these kinds of systems, technologies, policies, and regulations to allow this to thrive within the country.
And so when we're looking at the post-COVID economy, Sonia, if I can come back to you, has the criteria changed for the ideal startup that you would want to invest in post-COVID, or has the criteria roughly remained the same?
Oh, it's actually well, in some ways it's the same, but in a lot of ways it's different. What COVID has taught us, and especially in the startup ecosystem, was we've seen it, and companies being so nimble, they're able to react to things. So if you have a founder that's able to react very quickly to a change in a very macro situation here, which we saw over the last 2 years, that's a phenomenal characteristic in a founder. And we actually saw that a lot with some of our founders. This is not fintech related, but we had one of our founders that's just 3D printing. And so when the pandemic hit, started 3D printing face shields right away. And so being able to be nimble and react to the times, react very quickly to the times, is and a very important quality in a startup, and that's one of the things that will remain. And being very digital, that can go across borders here is a very important criteria we look at. We look at a few things. We obviously look at the founders and their ability to grow, adapt, and deal with the changing times. We look at the business model to see how digital it is. A very business that deals with lots of logistics, et cetera, needs warehousing, et cetera. That is more difficult. Where if you have a company that's very digital, like for example doing KYC verification, that's a company that we're very interested in because it can go across borders, it can deal with many clients, and it can and we saw during COVID that digital is very, very, very important. So anything that's bringing digital to the forefront and making things easier and solving real problems is something we're continuing to look at. Long story short, it's just a lot has changed in the last 2 years, and a lot has changed in the tech industry. And some things remain, but being nimble, I think, being able to adapt to the times is really, really important.
And so to that, Sonia, then, what have been the biggest challenges posed by the pandemic for startups who are looking for those crucial investments in uncertain times like this?
You know what? It's actually interesting for startups looking for funding right now, because of the pandemic and multiple reasons in the region. We've got governments that are the government here, like the Saudi government, the UAE government, have been putting a lot more dollars to work into the ecosystem, and that has been very, very helpful for the startups during the pandemic and post the pandemic, to be able to function and grow. And so they've been doing it by funding VCs such as us, and then we fund the startups. And that has been working very, very, very well to catalyze this ecosystem and to catalyze and build an environment and where people can grow. And what we noticed a lot during the pandemic is that in other countries that did not have the resources that the Middle East has and the UAE has, we've had vaccinations, really. We had access to healthcare very easily. People have been moving and coming into the UAE as a place to live, a place to work remotely. So talent has been something that our startups in the past struggled to work with, but now post-pandemic, and because of the support of the governments here and allowing for visas, et cetera, for people to come in, talent has been much more easier for them to recruit. This has been a place where people want to work, live, and grow their businesses. And the way we've handled the pandemic has been so easy in terms of how schools are opened and how people are taking the right protocols are in place, but life has gone back to normalcy a lot more here than in other areas in the world, and that has just helped, especially this ecosystem, our tech industry, because especially in tech, working from remotely is very easy for us to do, and Dubai has made it a good place for people to work remotely and still operate 100% in this very uncertain environment.
It's absolutely been one of the countries in the world that has really best dealt with the pandemic and has done it so quickly as well. So absolutely to that, Sonia. But Ahmed, of course, there will be those with great business ideas that with the right support could really take off. Can you elaborate on the steps taken by Emirates Development Bank to support SMEs and startups, especially in the post-COVID era?
Right. So, I mean, it's really perfect timing for Emirates Development Bank to come and play a key role for the enablement of the economy of the UAE. And it's one of the reasons why this whole transformation revamp of Emirates Development Bank happened last May of 2021, apologies. And the focus has been towards financing and development of SMEs and large corporates in the economy. So as a part of the project 300 billion that was announced by the federal government, under the purview of Ministry of Industry and Advanced Technology, EDB has committed to deploying 30 billion dirhams of funding into the market over the next 5 years. We're focused on 5 key sectors: healthcare, advanced technology, infrastructure, food technology, and manufacturing. These 5 key sectors are the sectors that we believe are poised for significant growth over the next 5 years, and also will have a direct impact on the sustainability and viability of the country's economy, moving away from non-oil GDP. So Emirates Development Bank is the key driver behind this. And we work, of course, with our partners across the government, local government, federal government, our partners that are in the private sector, such as the private banks. We are really here to help pivot and help coordinate for the market as a whole to get financing towards those key industries and the SMEs and startups in those key industries.
Okay, now let's talk strategy. I want to invite both of you to talk about the innovative strategies that you're adopting to become more agile in a volatile market. So if I can start with you, Sonia, would love to hear more about how VentureSouq is doing that.
Just to get the question correct, what internally our strategies to be more nimble?
Yes, in a volatile market.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're actually growing right now in this environment. So we're hiring in different markets, as we just hired someone in Egypt, and when you're growing and it's an environment where you're not seeing everyone, like as Mr. Ahmed had mentioned before, we need to be much more nimble within ourselves and figure out ways in which to connect to each other and internally as a because we think of ourselves where we fund startups. We are a startup ourselves, so we have to, with the criteria that we look at for our startups, we have to do internally look upon ourselves. So we have going completely digital is the name of the game, I think, across the board. So that has become our strategy, the way that ease in sharing information across teammates to and to people outside of our company has been very key to us. So everything has to be digital and everything and very transparent. And so transparency amongst your employees while you're working remotely, we think is very, very important. Communication is very, very important because you're no longer getting that water cooler talk anymore. You're not getting the spontaneous conversation. So for us, it's very much we need to make sure we're all connected together, and we're doing that through various technology and just having a really good tech stack in place where we can all see what everybody's doing and communicate in a very seamless fashion.
Ahmed, I believe there are similar strategies as well for EDB as well, correct?
Yes, of course. I'll touch on it in a couple of ways. So from a communications perspective, again, because we've transformed and relaunched our brand, so there's a couple of things that we've done from a communications perspective. One, we've completely shied away from any kind of physical setup or marketing. So we've gone everything completely digital, mainly social. So to really get and communicate what we're here to do and what we're trying to do in the market. It's one thing. I mean, everybody wants to get financed, but how do you get that message out to them? It's getting the message out to the right people. So on one hand, it's making sure that we're really focused on digital and social, and then on the other hand, when we do focused like physical presence, we go to the right groups in the market here in the UAE. And what I'm talking about is the right, for example, free zones or the right business groups that exist within the UAE in order to make sure that we communicate the right messages to them. From a segment perspective, we've also gone completely digital when you talk about your startups and your small companies. So one of the things that we saw when we first, were working on this strategy and launching it, putting it in the market, was a key issue that was being faced by the market was financial inclusion for small and micro companies. Their ability to open up bank accounts was incredibly difficult. KYC processes, compliance processes, and then how do you? I mean, these are the bedrock of any economy. If you really want growth over the years, you need your startup community to have access to the financial sector. And so, being Emirates Development Bank, being a digital bank that we had set up was our Emirates Digital Business Bank. we were able to open up accounts for free zone companies, onshore companies, and do it within 48 hours. And we've had 500 plus, actually, sorry, as of last week, it was 650 plus companies that have used this service to open up bank accounts, completely digital, completely free to use, no minimum balance, no maintenance cost, all these kinds of fees and charges that banks sometimes will have. We're here completely to support that sector and make sure that segment of the market has the ability to open up bank accounts. We also had to pivot on the way that we dealt with large corporates. So we actually set up a whole large corporate business because, again, large corporates tend to be the anchors that SMEs and startups and different smaller companies exist around. And so we had to start dealing with large corporates on that basis. So when we look to finance projects that are considered GRE or large corporate because they have economic impact for the country, we look at very, very much what are the impacts for job creation, what are the impacts for the SMEs that could benefit from us financing those anchors. And we take all of that into calculation when we come to give out our loans and our facilities. So on one hand, how we communicate our message is something that we had to really be innovative and strategic and go digital on. On the other hand is how we actually deal with the different segments of the market that we finance. We had to also have a approach between digital and physical and a targeted approach to support those key segments and sectors.
Our questions are coming in from our audience. David from Scotland has one for you, Sonia. With the rise of digital and tech startups, what does it take to have a winning idea? What is it that you are looking for? And I know that you have covered that in a little bit of detail now. But what is it? What is it about that winning idea? What makes you go, this is it? We're going for it.
Absolutely. If you kind of take a step back and think about like in very, very like kind of succinctly what you're looking for a company that's solving a real problem that exists right now that technology will be able to help solve and basically it's an inefficient something where the inefficiencies in the market and you're going to make them efficient by technology, and that problem has to be solving a big market size. So like when we're looking at a company, we want to make sure that, if you have a great solution, but it only targets like a small percentage of the population and it's very, very niche, you could do very well in that population, but you'll be capped at how much you can grow. So if we're looking to invest and we're looking for us in a tech company is probably solving a real problem that technology will solve in a big market. And then the X factor is the founder or the founders the right people to solve that problem and to execute. So if we've got that winning combination, we're flying.
Nice, I like that. Nice, concise answer. I hope that that helps you there, David. Maya from Singapore. This one is for you, Ahmed. Asking about how, as the financial sector gets more digitized, what should banks do to strengthen digital financial literacy awareness for the public as well?
Okay, so digital financial literacy, I would say that banks, if you're talking about commercial banks, they have a responsibility towards their shareholders. And in turn, you would hope that they would move towards digital financial literacy for as much people as possible in order to have a better understanding of their products and services as they enter the financial sector. So I would say that to a certain extent, commercial banks have a responsibility towards this, but in turn, it should have a payback towards their shareholders if you're asking me from the commercial banking perspective. From our perspective as Emirates Development Bank, we are 100% owned by the federal government of the UAE, and therefore we look at it as a mandate. So a part of our mandate is actually to have non-financial services where we look at how we can help small companies, startups, SMEs have better financial literacy, have a better understanding of how to improve their creditworthiness and their ability to get loans in order to improve their businesses.
May I add to that, if you don't mind? We actually are investing in companies that are helping to add to and to financial literacy and, just building and bringing information out to the masses. Because when you think about it, for example, if you think about a regular, trading account, somebody that just trades their stocks daily, if you're competing against, people that have, teams of research analysts, they're always going to do better, right? But we invested in a company called Faraka, which is a trading, just a trading app, the Robinhood for the Middle East. But then the power that they provide and they're powering their investors is the knowledge. So they put out as much information as possible to the investors, so they can also trade and make trades with more information, or the likes that someone with more institutional investors would have. And that has been really helpful when you have tech startups that are bringing information out into the public and making it less for the elite and more for something that everyone can take advantage of.
Fantastic. Absolutely. Making it more inclusive for everybody. Sonia Gokhale, founding partner at VentureSouq, and Ahmed Alnaqbi, CEO of Emirates Development Bank. Thank you both so much for an incredibly insightful discussion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sally.
Very much.